My girlfriend stole my company and married my cousin when my family disowned me. They thought I was done, but I'm back for revenge. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when the unthinkable happened. I was sitting at my desk, coffee in one hand and scrolling through emails with the other, when I stumbled upon a message that looked like every other corporate announcement. I opened it, hoping for some clarification, but it was a notice of termination. Surely this had to be a mistake. I needed some clarification. The message was blunt and impersonal. They said they had to let me go from Morgan Thompson Group, effective immediately. I should contact HR for details about my separation package. I was shocked. How could I be laid off? I helped build this company from the ground up. I was in shock. I texted Susan right away. She wasn't just my girlfriend of 5 years. She was a founder too. She'd know what was going on. My message was simple. HR says I'm out. The reply came back almost instantly, but it wasn't the reassurance I'd hoped for. Charlie, it's true the board has decided to go in a different direction. We need to talk. I grabbed my coat and headed out, getting some bewildered looks from colleagues who'd probably seen the same email about my layoff as I walked out. I could hear whispers following me, each one a stab of betrayal. I reached the hotel where the company was hosting a lavish event that evening. It was odd for a company supposedly cutting costs to choose such a place, but there I was. The lobby was buzzing, filled with chatter and the clinking of glasses. I spotted Susan on stage, radiant and confident, addressing a crowd of eager listeners. She was painting a rosy picture of the company's future. My picture of the company's future was one of promising growth and prosperity. Felt surreal. My anger simmered as I made my way through the crowd. The air crackled with tension as people started to notice me. Their expressions ranged from sympathetic to outright scornful. I didn't care. All I wanted was to confront Susan. I reached the stage and her smile vanished. It was replaced by a cold glare. Security, she snapped. Her voice cut through the murmur of the room. How did this person get in? I ignored the sting of I asked Susan, why did I get laid off? The room was tense. People were whispering and looking at me with disdain. I could feel their mockery. One person muttered, he thinks HEK is the boss? How does he have the nerve to talk like that? Susan, aware of the murmurs, spoke in a clipped tone, her words cutting through the tense air. That's right, Charlie. You've been fired and you are no longer welcome here. Her voice turned steely as we moved towards an IPO. We need to streamline operations. Unfortunately, you are no longer a part of that vision, but everyone else. She continued, her voice taking on a sarcastic tone. Raises and promotions are coming your way. Cheers erupted from the crowd, a stark contrast to the mood. As the icy knot forming in my stomach grew tighter, security guards summoned by Susan started toward me as I was ushered out. A cowardly kick landed on my leg from behind, and a woman's voice dripping with disdain echoed in the hallway. Good riddance, she said. At least Susan's got brains. Without him weighing her down, she'll make a fortune. The winter air was a cold mirror to my own heart. Susan and I had built Morgan Thompson Group from scratch after graduation. I had put my blood, sweat, and tears into this company, but now I was being laid off. I was expendable. I had helped create the company, but now I was being pushed out. There was no way I was leaving without answers. The next morning, the company felt like a stranger's territory. My office, which once hummed with my energy, was now occupied by someone else. In the corner, a few boxes awaited me. Inside were my laptop, framed photos, and the remnants of my professional life. As I was leaving, I found my cousin Peyton Morgan in my chair, grinning at me. Morning, Charlie, he said. I ignored him and went to look at the boxes. I saw a picture frame that he was playing with. It was the one with me and Susan. Congratulations on your eviction, he said. He leaned back in the chair and sighed. Or maybe I should congratulate you on your ex finding a new plaything. His words ignited a spark within me, and before I could stop myself, my fist connected with his jaw. He let out a yelp, followed by a flurry of curses as he clutched his ring finger, face flushed with pain. Despite the pain, his arrogance remained intact. In fact, he seemed to think this was all I could do now that I was desperate. "Nice one, Charlie," he sneered. "You've got nothing left now. Let's see how you fend with empty pockets." A cold anger settled over me. Someone with, if you have nothing to lose, you have nothing to fear from someone who has everything to protect. I countered, leaving him spluttering in the stolen chair. The whispers that greeted me as I walked through the corridors felt like a swarm of hungry mosquitoes. If they enjoyed gossip so much, maybe I should have fired half of them when I had the chance. I thought bitterly, storming toward Susan's office and kicking the door open with a resounding bang. Susan was startled and turned around, her face full of fury. "Do you think you're still in charge here?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. It was time for me to take back what was mine. This was where it all started. I was standing in Susan's office, feeling angry and shocked. I realized that this was more than just a professional betrayal. It was personal. Susan's eyes were cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth they used to hold for me. It felt like "You don't belong here anymore, Charlie. It's best you leave." I was in a daze on the drive home, my mind racing. Each mile added to the weight of betrayal that settled like a stone in my stomach. How could Susan do this to me? How could she align with PT of all people? Just last week, we were talking about wedding plans and a future together. It didn't make sense. When I got home, I was hit by the stark reminder of the loneliness that awaited me. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with the reality of my situation. I was out of a job, out of a relationship, and seemingly out of options. Later that evening, I couldn't shake the need for answers, so I drove back to the hotel. The party was over, but the cleanup crew was still there, moving through the now empty halls like ghosts. I needed to see the bet. I needed to understand the full scope of the treachery hidden behind a column. So I watched as Susan and Peyton exited the ballroom laughing, their arms linked. It was a punch to the gut. The laughter, the intimacy. They didn't notice me as they headed towards the hotel bar. Their smiles were too bright, their conversation too light. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. I watched as Peyton pulled out a chair for Susan. The gesture was it was a familiar yet foreign feeling. They ordered drinks and their heads were close together, sharing secrets and plans that no longer included me. The bartender handed them their drinks, and as they clinked glasses, Peyton said something that made Susan throw her head back and laugh. That laugh I had loved, but now it was a sound that would haunt me. The reality of their relationship and their betrayal was too much to bear. I left the hotel, the images of their togetherness burning in my mind. Fueling a fire of I was determined to fight back. They thought they could crush me and leave me with nothing, but they were wrong. Over the next few days, the news of my firing spread like wildfire. My phone was flooded with messages from colleagues, some expressing sympathy and others curious about the drama. Amidst the flood of notifications, one message stood out. It was from a former mentor, someone who had left the company a year ago due to similar shady dealings. His words were a cold comfort, but they did offer a glimmer of hope. "Keep your head up, Charlie," he said. As I thought about what to do next, I realized that Susan and PTON weren't just trying to take my job and my dignity. They were trying to destroy me. Peyton, who I'm no longer related to, had always seemed envious of my position at the company. And it seemed like Susan wanted more than just professional success. She wanted power, and Peyton was her way in. The situation was so bitter, but I had to keep going. It also gave me a push to get back in the game. I was down, but I wasn't out. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one, but not on their terms. I needed a plan to turn the tables and come back stronger in the midst of this chaos. Then, I got a call from someone in another industry. Someone had heard through the grapevine about my departure and said, "Hey, you're free these days, right?" There was a hint of opportunity in his voice. "Let's meet up. I might have something that could interest you." I grabbed at the chance. This lifeline. I agreed to meet. Perhaps this was the break I needed. A chance to rebuild from the ashes of my former life. The meeting was set at a quiet cafe, away from the prying eyes of the corporate world. My contact, Mr. Harrison, was already there, nursing a coffee. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a sympathetic nod. "Rough deal you got there at Morgan Thompson," he began, his voice low, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise. "I'm starting a new venture and I were looking for someone with your expertise to take on the offer." It was a breath of fresh air and a chance to start anew. We talked for hours, going over the details and planning strategies. By the end of the conversation, I had a new job and a new purpose. I was going to build something even bigger and better than what I had at Morgan Thompson. This time, I would be in charge, with no Susans or Pitons to stab me in the back. As I left the cafe, I had a plan in mind. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Susan and Piton had made a big mistake in underestimating me. They took my job and tried to take my dignity, but they couldn't take my spirit or my resolve. They thought they'd crushed me and left me with nothing. They were wrong. Now I was back to claim everything they thought they had stolen: the company, the power, the revenge. And it all started with this new opportunity and this new beginning as the sun set over the city, casting long shadows down the bustling streets. As I walked down the busy streets, I felt the weight of the past days lift slightly. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready. After securing a new venture that promised a fresh start, I drove back to my apartment, feeling a mix of relief and unresolved anger. The streets were quiet, mirroring the turmoil inside me. This turmoil wasn't just about losing a job or a girlfriend. It was about betrayal from those I trusted most. Back at my apartment, the silence was deafening. The walls of the apartment, once filled with laughter and dreams, now echoed back my solitary footsteps. It was here in this empty space that I fully realized the impact of the past week's events. I slumped onto the couch, my head in my hands, trying to process the sudden shift in my circumstances. The next morning was challenging, waking up without a job to go to, no emails to check, and no meetings to attend. It was a stark reminder of my new reality. I felt adrift, like a ship without a rudder, tossed about by waves of uncertainty and frustration. I tried to stay busy to keep my mind occupied, but every task was punctuated with painful reminders of Susan and the life we had planned together. Later that day, as I was sorting through some old business cards, I came across Susan's. Her name, her title next to mine, twisted the knife. Rudder tossed about by waves of uncertainty and frustration. I tried to keep busy to keep the dark thoughts at bay. I cleaned the apartment, did the laundry, and did anything to stay moving. But every task was punctuated with painful reminders of Susan and the life we had planned together. Every corner of the apartment and every item we picked out together felt tainted. Later that day, as I was sorting through some old business cards, I came across Susan's. The sight of her name and her title next to mine twisted something inside me. In a fit of anger, I ripped the card to shreds. It was a small act, but it felt good. Felt like I was taking back a little control. But anger and petty revenge don't fill the void for long. I needed to face what had happened head-on to understand why I needed closure. I picked up my phone several times, thumb hovering over Susan's contact. But each time I put it down again, I wasn't ready to hear. That evening, I went for a walk to clear my head. The city was busy, with couples walking hand in hand and people laughing. It felt wrong that everything was moving on without me. As I walked, I passed the cafe where Susan and I had spent so many hours planning our future. It was a stark contrast to how things were now. We used to sit by the window with our laptops open, discussing strategies, and dreaming big. Now those dreams were dust. I kept walking, not really knowing where I was going. Eventually, I found myself at a small park we used to visit. I sat on a bench, the cold metal biting through my coat, and watched as a young family played nearby. A father tossed his daughter into the air, her laughter ringing through the air. It was a stark contrast to the silence of my apartment and the silence of my life. Now it was there on that cold bench that the reality of my isolation truly sank in. I'd lost more than just a job and a girlfriend. I'd lost my support network, my confidence, and my future. The realization of all this was overwhelming. It was the first time since this whole mess began that I'd let myself feel it. I cried for what felt like hours, for everything I'd lost and everything that had been taken from me. But as the tears dried and the initial wave of grief passed, a new determination filled me. I was down, but I wasn't out. I wasn't out yet, but I was still here. I was still standing, and I was angry. Angry enough to fight back and reclaim what was mine. I walked home with a new resolve. Susan and PTON had tried to take everything from me, but they had underestimated my resilience. They thought they had left me with nothing, but they were wrong. I spent the next few days diving into the new opportunity Mr. Harrison had offered. It was hard starting from scratch, but it was also invigorating. It was incredible. I was building something new, something mine, something that no one could take from me. After weeks of hard work and networking, my new venture began to take shape. Each morning, I woke up with a purpose, fueled by the determination to not just rebuild, but to surpass everything I had lost. This wasn't just about a business comeback. It was about reclaiming my life and proving to everyone, especially Susan and PTON, that I was far from beaten. I rented a small office in the building was small and unassuming, with stark white walls and fluorescent lights. But it was mine. I set up my desk near the window, overlooking the busiest street. It was a constant reminder of the bustling world I was fighting to make a mark in again. My first major task was to solidify the team. I hired 2 interns, both fresh out of college, eager to make their mark in the tech world. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and it reminded me of myself when we first started. We spent long days and nights brainstorming, coding, and planning. We were building something from scratch, and the energy in the office was palpable. One morning, as I was reviewing our progress, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was an invitation to a major industry conference, one where I had been a speaker the previous year. My heart skipped a beat. This was my chance to step back into the spotlight and show the industry that Charlie Morgan was still a force to be reckoned with. With the conference coming up, I was totally consumed by preparations. I worked on my presentation every night, making sure everything was perfect. This wasn't just any presentation. It was my public comeback, and I couldn't afford to mess up. The day of the conference came and went faster than I expected. I was standing backstage waiting for my turn to speak, and my stomach was a knot of nerves. I peeked out at the audience and saw several familiar faces, including industry bigwigs, former colleagues, and even a few from Morgan Thompson Group. My hands were a little shaky, but I clenched them into fists to steady myself. This was it. When my name was announced, I stepped onto the stage, and the lights were blindingly bright. I took a deep breath and started to speak. My voice was clear and confident. I talked about innovation, resilience, and the future of technology. With each word, I could feel the room's energy shift. After the presentation, the audience was interested and engaged. People crowded around to talk to me, and old connections were rekindled. I made some new connections and got some new business. It was a great conference, and by the end of the day, I had a lot of new contacts and potential leads. I shared the news with my team back at the office, and we celebrated into the early hours of the morning. Felt like we were on the brink of something big. Over the next few months, we started to see some big changes. Our hard work started to pay off. We got our first big contract, which was not just lucrative but also highly visible. It was the break we had been waiting for. The project was challenging and required all our skills and resources, but we were up for it. Every milestone we hit was a step away from my past failures and a step towards a brighter future. As our reputation grew, so did the business. We moved to a larger office and hired more staff. And we started getting noticed by some big players in the industry. It was a pretty exciting time. I often found myself working late into the night, driven by a mix of fear and excitement. Fear of failing again and excitement at what we were building. One late evening as I was leaving the office, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I was a bit hesitant, but I answered it. It was a headhunter representing a major tech company. They had heard about my recent success and were interested in discussing a potential acquisition. My heart was racing. This was the big leagues. We arranged to meet for coffee the next day. I sat across from the headhunter, listening to him outline their proposal. Felt surreal. Here I was, less than a year after being betrayed and ousted from my own company, discussing multimillion-dollar deals. The meeting went well. As I walked back to my office, I couldn't help but smile. It was a vindication of all the hard work, the long nights, the doubts, and the fears. I'd made it back, not just to where I'd been, but to somewhere better, stronger. That night, I stood by my office window, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below, each one a reminder of the possibilities that lay out there. I thought about Susan and Peyton, about the hurt and betrayal they tried to break me with, but they'd unwittingly forged me into something stronger. I wasn't just back. I was better than ever. As I turned from the window back to the plans, I knew that this was just the beginning. The real work, the real fight was still ahead, and I was ready for it, more ready than I'd ever been. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Our team expanded, bringing in new talent to manage the influx of projects that had begun to pour in with each new client and successful project. My company was cementing its reputation as a rising star in the tech industry. As I looked at all the projects on my desk, I knew that this was just the beginning. The real work and the real fight were still ahead, and I was ready for it. I was more ready than I had ever been. The next few weeks after the meeting with the headhunter were a whirlwind of activity. Our team expanded, and we brought in new talent to manage the influx of projects that had begun to pour in with each new client and successful project. My company was cementing its reputation as a rising star in the tech industry. One morning, as I was looking over project reports in my bigger office when I got an email that surprised me. It was an invitation to a fancy tech industry event that only the bigwigs got to go to. It was a chance to make deals and shape the future. This was a sign that I'd made it back in a big way. I got ready for it right away. This wasn't just any event. It was a networking event, my reintroduction to the elite, many of whom had witnessed my fall. I chose my attire carefully. A sharp, modern suit that signaled confidence without ostentation. I was ready to face the past, including any encounters with those from Morgan Thompson Group. The night of the gala, the venue was spectacular, bathed in soft light with live music setting a celebratory tone. I mingled, exchanged pleasantries, and gradually made my way through the room. The conversations were light but laden with opportunities. Each handshake I saw Susan and Pton halfway through the evening. They were as poised as ever, Pton with his charming smile and Susan with her calculated grace. I felt a surge of triumph. I was on my terms, successful despite their SCH schemes. I decided not to avoid them. Instead, I walked directly towards them, my approach confident, their smiles. I felt a bit awkward as I got closer to a clear sign that they hadn't expected to see me in such a place, at least not so soon. Charlie, Susan greeted me. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were wary. Peyton? I nodded and offered my hand, which he shook after a brief hesitation. You look well, Peyton managed, attempting casual friendliness. I feel well, I replied, my gaze steady. The new is thriving. It's amazing what fresh starts can lead to. Susan's smile tightened. That's good to hear, she said. We've heard great things, thanks. I excused myself with a polite nod before they could extend the conversation. I didn't need their validation, but it felt good to see the surprise and maybe even a hint of unease in their eyes. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of success. I left the gala with a handful of promising business cards and a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the professional. I had faced my past, and I had not just survived, I had thrived. The next day at the office was full of excitement. Everyone was buzzing with the news of my encounter with Susan and Pton. It seemed to give everyone a boost of energy. It wasn't just about business. It was about us as a team. We were rising from the ashes and proving ourselves. We kept pushing forward, and as we did, our projects grew. We were no longer just a startup. We were a key player in the tech field. Our success caught the eye of others. We got offers from several big companies, including some partnership and acquisition offers. We considered each one carefully. I wasn't going to make any hasty decisions that could lead us back into a situation like the last one. This time, I was in control, and I would make sure that whatever decisions were made would benefit not just me but also all those who had trusted me with their careers during this comeback. During one particularly intense negotiation session, I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the naive co-founder from Morgan Thompson Group. By the time fall rolled around, our company was not only still around, but it was thriving. We were reaching more people and making twice as much money. It felt great to walk into the office every day and know that everything we did, every project we worked on, and every success we had was a testament to how hard we worked and how resilient we were. One fall day, I got a call from an old industry friend who had become a mentor. "Charlie, you've bounced back and then some." He said I was nothing short of inspiring. His words made me pause. I had come back, but more importantly, I had transformed a setback into the foundation for something bigger, something better. As I looked out of my office window, the city sprawled below, bustling and vibrant. I realized that this view, this moment of quiet triumph, wasn't just a personal victory. It was a signal to everyone who had ever doubted or betrayed me. I hadn't just returned to the game. I had changed it. As the seasons changed, I knew one thing for certain. The best was yet to come. I wasn't just rebuilding what I had lost. I was creating something that would last, something that would outshine my past, and something that no one could ever take from me again. As my company continued to flourish, gathering momentum with each successful project, whispers began circulating in industry circles about the faltering performance of Morgan Thompson Group. The company that once seemed unassailable, the company that had unceremoniously pushed. I was struggling to keep my company afloat on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I got a heads up from my assistant that Susan and PTON had shown up unannounced. I was surprised at first, but curiosity got the better of me. What could have driven them to show up at my doorstep, especially without prior notice? I told my assistant to show them in as they entered my office. The contrast between their anxious demeanor and my calm composure was striking. These days, they had the power to dictate terms. Now, they were in my world, and they knew it. "Charlie, thanks for seeing us on such short notice." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about what they said. They were the ones who'd caused my past problems, and now they were asking for my help. I said slowly, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. "What exactly are you asking of me?" "Simple," Susan replied. "We need money and expertise to keep the company going. We're hoping you could provide that, maybe even help manage some of our most important projects." PTON added, "We wouldn't come to you if we weren't desperate, Charlie. We think this could be a win-win, mutual benefit." That's what they said when they needed my skills but not my presence. I thought about their proposal. The power dynamics are different now. I took a deep breath and then told them my decision was clear in my mind. "Susan Payton, I built my company from the ground up after everything that happened. Now you expect me to help save it. Yours." Their faces fell as they realized that this meeting might not go the way they had planned. "I have another idea," I continued, speaking slowly and deliberately instead of talking about Morgan Thompson's group. "I propose that we take over your remaining contracts. Your clients deserve stability and innovation, and you're clearly struggling to provide that." The shock on their faces was palpable. Susan tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand to stop her. "You need a solution, and I'm offering one. This isn't just about business. It's about making sure that the projects you can't handle anymore are still managed well." I could see the conflict playing out in their faces. This wasn't the help they were looking for, but it was the only offer I had. "We'll need to talk about this," Peyton said after a long pause. "Of course," I replied. "Take as much time as you need, but remember your clients and employees are waiting for a solution. I'm offering one to make sure they don't suffer because of." As they left my office, I felt a sense of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about asserting a new order. I had not just survived their betrayal. I had risen above it. I was in a place where I could dictate terms. Over the next few days, my team and I negotiated. We meticulously reviewed Morgan Thompson Group's contracts. We assessed each one for viability and fit with our current portfolio. It was a thorough process. It ensured that we only took on projects that would really benefit from our intervention. Finally, the agreement was signed. My company would take over several key contracts from Morgan Thompson Group, effectively absorbing much of their operations. The new news of the takeover made headlines, showing how fortunes had changed. I watched the news coverage and felt a sense of closure. This was more than just a business maneuver. It was a symbolic end to the chapter that began with my dismissal. I had not only rebuilt my life, but I also made sure that my career story was one of resilience and strategic thinking. This move meant more business and a kind of redemption. It showed that in business, it's not just about the falls you take, but how you get back up. Now I'm at the helm of my thriving company, and I know that the best way to respond to any setback is with undeniable success.